Fantastic. Okay, recording started. So yeah, hello everyone. Thanks for attending. I guess this is the fourth webinar where we're going to be presenting our gap analysis on the final topic of the minimum operational data set. So today's session will focus on instructions, activities, and actions, and we'll walk through the gaps that we found so far. Welcome your feedback as we're going through that gap analysis to find out if there's anything in there that doesn't make sense to you. And please feel free to post questions in the chat. If we don't get to answer them during the session today, we're collecting all of those questions. I think we've got everyone's emails from the sign up, and we can respond to those in due course. So I'll apologise again for going through this again, but just in case there's anyone new on the call, just a quick overview of the terminology product. So the terminology product's available at data.digitalsocialcare.co.uk. Ultimately, the kind of why it's there is because there isn't really, or wasn't really, a central place for data standards across the UK, a place where users could go and find social care definitions, terminologies, data collections, and standardized data elements to collect information. And there wasn't really an open area where they could contribute and feedback on the development of those standards. And the other side of the terminology product is for standards developers. We're inviting standards developers to come in and curate standards, create standards, and really work in the open through the platform. So what we've tried to do throughout this process is have a place to publish the drafts, the alphas, the betas of all the specifications that are out there. And we're really trying to invite feedback as we're going through the standards development journey. So within that terminology product, which is a mix of the website, the content, and the publication process, the kind of key product that we're developing in there at the moment is the minimum operational data set. So just going back to kind of basics, and so why are we developing it? Ultimately, it's to improve the quality of care, and it's around really sharing best practice for data management and data collection. Now, how does that actually work? Well, we want to create a common glue that allows care actors to share information between lots of different parties. We want them to be able to do that in a consistent way, so they don't constantly have to map different things, and they know that they're talking about the same things when they're sharing information. We really want to reduce burden. We know that at the moment there is a lot of duplication going on across the system, and hopefully having that kind of consistency and ability to share will mean that information doesn't have to be repetitively entered again and again and again. I guess the development of the mods came after doing some analysis of the healthcare data models, and we felt like there was a lot of good stuff in the standard healthcare space, but looking at the use cases for social care and running those health models against those use cases, we quickly saw that actually there needed to be some modification, hence the development of the minimum operational data set. And I guess really the last parts of the why are really about, let's stop reinventing the wheel. Let's create something that everyone can use that represents best practice. We know that there's a lot of innovative assistive technology that's coming online. We really want to bring that into the way that everyone works. But to do that, we need a common understanding of data, and we need to create consistency. And ultimately, we want to be able to, we know the system there's a lot going on at the moment, so we really want to make sure that we can reduce costs, whether that's reporting, building data pipelines, or creating operational efficiencies using data. So in terms of the approach, what have we done? What have we done so far? Hi Paul, I think we've got you on the mic. We went through a discovery phase. At the beginning of this journey, we spoke to 100 people across various different sectors and within various different groups.
Yeah, I think.
So that was in the first 3 months of the project. The second part was really about engaging with social care practitioners, and we had a whole engagement phase during that, and we're carrying that on at the moment during the consultation. And then we've had a number of different webinars. So we published a draft in November and then ran a whole load of webinars on that draft specification for the mods. We then published an alpha in January and had another round of webinars and targeted interviews and collected feedback. And then we published a beta in March. So this really now is collecting feedback and trying to consult on that beta with a view of publishing a version 1 of the mods in October, which leads me quite nicely to the plan. So at the moment, our kind of key milestones are we want to be publishing a draft of the mods. So that's following on from the beta that was published in March. We want to publish a draft in August. We want to update the conceptual model that came along with the mods, and that should be published in August as well. And that's really with a view of publishing the mods as a standard in October. And at that point, we'll publish a glossary that goes with it. We'll publish some guidance. We'll publish a new version of the conceptual model that'll also be have gone through our own assurance processes, and then it will feed into a DAPB process. So that then goes onto a national level where a standards committee will review it and they'll assure it, and with a view that that should kind of be approved probably in 2024, sometime in 2024. So today, again, apologies if you've seen all of that before. What are we asking for? Well, I'll go through the kind of feedback that we're trying to gather over the next month or so. We'll go through the specifications and the conceptual model for instructions, activities and actions, and I'll talk through where we've got the approach and how we see that working. We'll present our gap analysis, and then we'll do some, we'll ask for some feedback and do some surveys. Probably what we'll do is we'll run the surveys during the call and we'll leave them open for the whole of the call, so we can hopefully collect feedback as we're going through the webinar today. So the minimum operational data set, what is it? So it's a few different things. Let's see if share my screen. So it's a data specification ultimately. So it's essentially, my laptop wakes up, and it's a set of data standards for collecting information. So we've got a section for administrative information, assessment and planning, audit, care actors, consent and legal information, instructions, activities and actions, which is what we'll be going through today, and observations. Essentially, if you go down to a particular part of the specification, let's say a person's demographic details, what you'll see is a set of information that we would expect providers to collect, and also the format that we would expect that information to be collected in. So let's say we're using something like ethnicity, we'd expect it to be captured using the ethnic category code 2001 types. And as the specification changes and the rules change, so there's I think the 2016 codes will come in soon, we will be changing those within the tool. We'll be updating the community to make sure that specification gets updated. In addition to the specification itself, we're publishing a whole load of guidance. So you'll notice if you go to data.digital social care and you navigate to the minimum operational data set, we're publishing all the webinars we're doing now. We'll keep those updated, and as we move through the process, we'll try and have kind of content that explains what the mods is all about. And then you'll see that there's a link out to some associated media. So alongside that data specification, we've also published a wiki, and that includes guidance. It includes information about the plan for development. It includes some information about the governance for the standard going forward. I'll just wait for my internet connection to wake up. And yeah, so here you'll find the kind of the mods guidance, purpose, background, requirements and use cases, some information about information governance, a link out to the glossary. As well as that, there's a conceptual model for social care, and again, we'll go through some of that today. in terms of the instructions, activities and actions. And really that's a blueprint for us to work from. So it allows us to say these are the major entities that we want to describe across the system. So we want to build information models for, and this is how they relate to one another. So those are the kind of, yeah, I guess those are that's really what the mods is. Today we're focusing in on instructions, activities and actions. We'll be sending out links to feedback forms. Ultimately, what we're trying to collect as part of the feedback is for each variable, let's say the outcome of an assessment, we want to understand how important it is in terms of the impact on care, high, medium and low. And the reason we want to find that out is so that we can agree across the community what attributes will be optional, what attributes would be required, and what attributes would be mandatory. And if things look like they've got a very, very high impact on care, presumably they would be in the required or mandatory area. If they look lower or medium, then potentially there's something that would be more optional. So that's why we're asking for feedback on those parts of the specification. And then the other side of it is really burden. So we look at impact and then we're looking at burden. So are you already collecting it? Are you collecting it in this format or a different format? And if you're not collecting it, would it be easy to implement it? And if you're not collecting it, do you think it would be difficult to implement? And again, that gives us a little bit of feedback on the specification, because if something, for example, has low impact on care and it's not collected and difficult to implement, potentially we need to be taking that out of the specification. So we'll be distributing those feedback forms and we'd love you to fill those in. I think it will really help for the quality of the specification going forward. So in terms of the gap analysis itself, so there's three main areas today that we'll be discussing: instructions, activities and actions, and we'll go into the major activities that have been included. I think someone might have a microphone on. Cool, I think that's gone. So before I go into it, what we've done is we've looked at an open EHR model that's kind of aligned with ISO 13606. And essentially the way they see instructions, activities and actions working is, let's say off the back of a care plan, you have a particular instruction, which is a high level instruction about, a person's care. That can then be split down into activities. So let's say one of those activities is giving someone regular medication. That would happen, you'd have a course of medication that happens kind of over a period of time. And that's an activity that you schedule in, and there'll be a duration of that activity, and there are potentially a number of repetitions of that activity. So that's really the instruction activity part. And then the action is about logging that particular thing has happened. So someone's gone up, they've given the person the medication, they've observed that they've taken their medication, and then they've logged that in the system. And that's what an action is. And that usually has a date and a time and something, associated with the fact that someone's seen that happen. So that's how the kind of model works. We would expect kind of high level instructions that are more narrative potentially. Those would be split down into activities, which tend to be scheduled. And then we're looking at actions, which are the logs to say that something has definitely happened. And then we've got an audit trail to show people that that has happened. So in terms of the model and how we see different entities within that kind of high level model work. Apologies, I haven't changed the slide. It's not administrative information. This is instructions, activities and actions. There are a number of activities that we focused on to start with. One of them's communication, another one was medication, another one was procedures, tasks, referral, and then services that are provided. Ultimately, you've got your instruction, which will determine, potentially many activities, which could be a load of these. They're usually performed in locations. You would expect them to be performed in someone's home, in someone's room. Ultimately, there will be a care actor who's responsible for each activity. The activity is performed for the subject of care, and then a number of actions are recorded against an activity. Sometimes those can be grouped into a visit, so you can have lots of actions that are grouped together into a particular visit. And again, sometimes you will expect an outcome of a particular action, and sometimes you would expect a number of observations that a person's made potentially while they've been at the house that would come out of doing a particular action. So that's the kind of, I guess, the blueprint for how those three kind of major elements work together. Let's go into instructions itself. So I think the key thing here is really more of a general thing. I think it's a generic, there's a generic model, a specification for this that we've reused. So there's nothing hopefully too contentious in it. Ultimately, we've got a few things around making a performing professional reference rather than including it as a kind of section within that model. And then there are some things around coding standards. So if you go into the model itself, so I'll go to the data dictionary, and I'll go into instructions, activities and actions. Pull this out so we can see a little bit more. So what we've got here is we've got a narrative description, a coded entry. Ultimately, that we want to specify the coding standards and we want to specify the namespaces. So that was one of the pieces of feedback that we had. We've got a link to the subject of care. We've got a link to the care plan where the instruction was determined, a date and expiry. So the only thing really here is we need to do some work on the coding standards, and rather than having performing professional as a kind of subsection under instruction, we're just going to have a link out, because probably in the database you would have a list of people and then you would link out to that person rather than having a big kind of subsection on the form. So and that's a general comment we've done for the whole specification. So next we're into the communication part, so the first activity that we specified. One of the things that we noted was communication and correspondence, ultimately using a very, very similar model. So potentially we would just want to have one term across both. So the correspondence is included in the administrative section at the moment, and potentially communication could sit in both those sections and those categories, but we should have a single bit of terminology for them. Content or a document should be a reference, and again we should have location of the communication potentially. So again, if we go into our activities, and we've got the first one, there is communication. We could potentially add where the communication was made, and then link out to the content, which tends to be a document that's associated with the kind of high-level communication metadata, which is about who it was between, when it happened, who received it, if it was received, the status of that communication, all that other information. So our next activity that we've reviewed is medications and medical devices. I think potentially we could split those up into two sections. That's a bit easier to navigate. So you've got one which is an area for medication and one which is an area for medical device. That was a bit of feedback. I think the medical devices at the moment don't have codes, so I'll take you through that, and we need to do some work there. Again, medical devices potentially should have some additional metadata associated with them if it's a bit of equipment, so start date, end date, for example. And then we've got the general comments that if you've been on the webinars, you've probably heard me say quite a few times. We want a reference to the performing professional. We don't need to say the person who recorded the information, because that's contained in our audit modules. So it doesn't need to be fully specified here as well. And then we need to add the coding references. So very quickly, I'll walk through medications and medical devices. Again, this is if you're implementing the PRSB, this is very, very similar. Well, this is the same as that. So it's a kind of well-used, well-defined data model. You've got your medication item cluster. Again, so course details, location, medication change summary. you've got an entry to say that a medication's being discontinued. And then you've got something for a medical device itself. And this is where we thought that potentially there needs to be a whole load of metadata that sits with that medical device, not just the name of the device, but the start date, the end date, and potentially the location. And I think we might move it out so that it's not just within the medication item. It might come out and sit elsewhere. Right. On to the next item. So procedures, again, I think this is quite a mature model that's gone through quite a few rounds with the PRSB. So it's really just the general stuff around kind of remove person recording the information, refer to performing professional, and just dive into the codes. I think for the most part we've put those codes in, but let's say anatomical site, there is a set of coded values. Actually, there are a set of SNOMED CT coded values that we would expect around kind of body structure, but we've just linked to them. I think one of the comments that we've had throughout the specification, something we're going to be working on, is actually adding that full list. So it's easy to navigate and it's easy for the team to kind of download that and pull that into their systems. So there's not much around procedure. Next one is referral. I think, again, this is a fairly mature model, and it's just really the general stuff that we've talked about in terms of how we model things. So referral to, at the moment, for instance, is a kind of subsection within the model. It could probably be just a reference out to an organization or a service. The same with referrer details. Just needs to be a reference, so we don't need to go into the subsections. And again, I think it's mature. It's been used a fair bit. It's got kind of the date of referral, the person you should return the response to, the referral method, criteria, who it's about, and potentially the instruction that said that the referral needed to happen. We've got the outcome of the referral. We've got some information about clinical urgency. And then the reason why. Service, I think there's probably a few more comments around service. So there is a piece of work going on with Open Referral UK, and there's a lot of standardization that's going on around the provision of services and identifying services. There's a few things in that model that we currently don't have. So the ID of the service, so it should be a unique ID, potentially the URL of a service, if that's available, an email address that's associated with that, and the status of that service as well. So these are things that aren't currently in the model, but potentially we could bring in. We're going to do some investigation in the social care package type to see whether there's potentially any coding standards we could bring in there as well. And at the moment in the model, there's a link through to the local authorities responsible for provision. However, there's also the organisation providing the service. And at the moment, that's not in the model. So that's potentially something that we would expect to pull in. And again, something you would see in, for example, the open referral standard that's out there at the moment. So yeah, you've got package type. So I think it's really we do have service provider, but we just need to make sure that that's aligned with the OpenID model. We've got location, and then we've got the local authority as well. Next one on the list is a task. So I think at the moment the only bits there where there's a requested period in there, which at the moment is a string. We could potentially make that a duration, and we need to put a bit around the code and namespace and refer to the owner or location rather than have it as a subsection. So in tasks, we've got the status of the task, the priority, the coded value for the task. Again, if we've got a code, we probably need to either specify all of the codes we'd expect. I think it's going to be fairly difficult with tasks at the moment. I'm not sure that they're particularly standardized. So potentially what we'll ask for here is a namespace. So if you do use a code, what coding standard have you used? And then, you know, we would hope in future iterations we would start consolidate that. And again, requested period. Again, this is at the moment a string, and I think it could be a duration, and then it can be machine readable. And then reference to location and reference to owner, rather than having a kind of subsection in there, probably would make sense. It ties into the general comments we've had. Vaccination is the next one. So again, we've got the general comments about references. We're going to remove the person completing the record. Again, that's the general comments because we've got that in the audit trail. I think there's quite a bit of work to go through the coded values to make sure they're specified fully. And we need to do some confirmation around, for example, manufacturing coding. So the vaccinations activity is contained here. So yeah, you've got the subject of care, date sequence instruction. We've got things around the body site. Again, what we've got here is a code. If you go to the metadata, there is again a reference set. So we potentially want to bring that in to make it easy to navigate rather than you having to go to the terminology browser and searching for that particular value set. So that's something we'll be working on. Formal professional will be a reference, person completing record will be out. And that probably covers vaccination. Again, most of these have been used you know, across the system. So I think the models for most of these areas are fairly mature. So there hasn't been a lot of change that we would expect. But again, this is where we're going out and asking community. So if you think there's anything that we have to change or there's something in the model that doesn't look right, please do get back to us and submit that feedback. So the last one on here is the action. So going back to the model, what we're looking at here is an action. So really, it's just a log that, you know, that activity that was scheduled has happened. And if we go back to the model, you know, potentially there's an outcome or an observation that comes out of it. So in terms of the gap analysis, it's a fairly simple kind of generic structure to collect that information. I think we've got a number of sections in there, so we should just refer to those sections rather than having them as sections within the model. And then there's some work to do around codes and namespaces. So if we go to the actions model within instructions, activities, and actions, these will be references. But ultimately, and the code needs to have a namespace. It's recorded against an activity, so there's a reference back to the activity, and then it's about a subject of care. So again, there's not a huge amount of change here through the gap analysis, but there's a little bit of work to fully specify some of the codes that we would expect. So I realise this is going to be a slightly shorter session. I think there's less around the changes in this particular one. I think just a more general comment that I thought it's worth sharing is that we're going to try and split the model into components when we publish it. What we would like is for someone to come in and search for a care plan rather than having to kind of navigate through assessment and planning and come down to care plan. It would be great if, you know, when we go in and start searching for care plan through the system, you know, we would be directed straight to the MODS care plan. Whereas at the moment, you know, there are lots and lots of places care plans are created, one of which is the MODS. So that's one of the things that we're going to be doing. The other area is in general, you've probably heard me talk about references a lot. So you're going to use references rather than sections. We're going through and identifying any gaps in the codes that have been provided. And in some cases, there are value sets that have been added as part of the metadata, but we haven't pulled those in, so they're not necessarily easy to use. So we're going to be trying to do some work around that. Initially, it will probably be more of a manual thing where we'll include a link out. But the general plan is we're going to link to a terminology server, which will allow us to update those value sets. And then another major bit of work we're going to be doing in this release is adding the multiplicities. So whether something's optional, whether something's required, whether something's mandated, and then, you know, 0 to many, 1 to many, 1 to 1, all of that kind of addition as well as part of that multiplicity. And I think that's where this feedback process now in the next couple of weeks becomes really, really important, because ultimately you need to tell us what is going to be, you know, impossible really to get into that specification. We're not going to be trying to make too much mandatory. We're going to be trying to make, you know, only the very, very essential things. But I think in terms of that kind of required and optional differentiation, that's where, you know, we need your help. We need some feedback. And we will hope by the end of August we will publish something that will have all of that information defined. In terms of the kind of relevant links, you can find the mods under data.digital social care. So there's a link here. We'll be sending the presentation out. You can see some feedback forms under the asset section. The conceptual models in our wiki here. So again, the link should be there. One of the things people asked for was the plan to be published. So we've published the kind of 6-month plan to November that takes us to the end of kind of the publication of mods in October, and feeds into then the national DAPB and DOB process to get the standard assured at a national level. And then there's also a service desk, so feel free to raise tickets within the service desk. Everything that goes into the service desk gets logged, and we review it with the whole team. So if you do have any feedback or any concerns or anything you want to raise, please do go there and log a ticket, and we'll definitely get back to you. I think at this point, we probably want to share the surveys. Charlotte, have we got the surveys? So we'll run a kind of a minute or so and ask. What I'll do is I'll share my screen while the survey is up, and hopefully we can get responses on each of these. So Charlotte, I'm assuming you've been running the survey as we've been going along.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. Yeah, they're up.
That's right. Okay. Cool. Okay. Well, we'll take those on board, and then we'll report those back. I'll quickly look at the chat because I know we have a little bit more time, and if not, then I will give everyone a little bit of time back. So we've got a question around ICS interoperability. So we're speaking to Disco, we've got an extraordinary meeting with Disco. So we have been talking to a few ICS teams, but we will be presenting next week. Andrew, I think.
I was just going to say the same thing, Adam. I was going to respond in the chat, but you beat me to it. So yeah, we should take these. This is a really important area, and we need to handle it separate. You know, in isolation for ICS. It's the idea, in principle, is that integrated records are drawing from these direct care systems. So if there is any specification variance in definitions and how that's done, we need to try and surface that as soon as possible. Yeah.
100%. And one of the things is also the collaboration with the PRSB we're doing there as well. So we know that the kind of core information model is being implemented across ICSs, and it's wherever possible, we're trying to reuse standards. We're not, again, trying to reinvent the wheel. We're trying to reuse the stuff that's out there. So we hope the mappings that have gone on in that space can then get reused within this space. We've also got a number of, we're working across the assured solution providers. So we've got a number of one-on-ones and interviews going on over the next couple of weeks. So we're going to be having kind of targeted sessions to feedback on the specific parts of the specification to get as much input and feedback as possible. We've had some requests to do some sessions with other organizations as well. So please reach out if you'd like to feedback and have a kind of session with me and or the team to go through it in a little bit more detail. Then do reach out. We've got about a month now to collect feedback and produce a draft. So now is really the time to do it. Once it goes into October in the DAPB process, it's a longer period until essentially once we go into the DAPB process and we publish a version one, we go changing things regularly.
Oh, I'm fine, thank you.
Change process. So yeah, if we can get the feedback in sooner rather than later, that would be great. I think I've got one more hand up from Rob, if that's okay.
Just a quick thought. When we work Sanctuary Towards Living, we're moving towards electronic care planning. I'm just wondered if you've had any contact with some of the main providers of ECPs. Just a thought really, because obviously they will be seeing lots of this data in these processes, not just across one, but across multiple different organisations. So I was wondering if that's on your radar, and also might be useful with our work with them to know if they're aware of this and how they could possibly feed into it.
So we're working across the 16 assured providers. So the focus and scope of this is really targeted at those providers, which we should have. I should have a link for. But if there's anyone else that you think we should specifically talk to, and a kind of friendly face, then we're always looking for for more feedback. I'll try and send the link out. So these are the kind of providers we're working with at the moment in terms of one-on-ones. If my Microsoft Teams allows me to paste into the chat, which it's not. Oh no, we're there. Okay, we've got the link. But yeah, reach out if you do. As I said, if you do think there's anyone who we should talk to in addition, then do shout, and we'll you've got our emails. Great. Excellent. So I guess that's really a wrap on this side. As I said, please do feel free to contact us again via the service desk or via emails. We'll log tickets either way. As I said, we've got a month really now to get that feedback in. So it's the kind of last chance before it will go into the kind of internal assurance process. And then it's not that then it may change. There is a kind of feedback loop. It's just a bit of a longer feedback loop. And yeah, otherwise look forward to talking to you. We'll be doing some more presentations probably when we publish the version 1 draft towards the end of August, and then again in October as well. So look forward to speaking to you all then, and also anyone who's coming to the targeted interviews. I'm sure I'll be speaking to many of you over the next couple of weeks.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Adam.
Cool. Cheers. Bye.
Thanks.